This video is a continuation of pool repair, other videos I have made. I use two of these pumps because it's always good to have a backup. I've had my pool since 1980, and several times I've had the pump fail for various reasons. And so not to be in a panic waiting for someone to help me, and so my pool doesn't turn green, I keep a pool pump ready to install. Now, in order to be able to change these pumps quickly, I have a plug on the end of the wire where I don't have to rewire the pump every time I change it. So these can be changed out in just a matter of minutes. You just cannot be too safe when it comes to grounds around water. I don't need to tell you that. This is grounded through the wire, through the plug, but it also has a separate ground, as you can see at the front of the motor. In this photo, I have not installed the stainless steel screws and washers that hold the pump to the base. Don't forget at the start of the season to install your strainer basket as shown here, as I did, because I was vacuuming the pool out, forgot to put the basket in, and the leaves clogged up the pump impeller and it quit pumping. But luckily I was going to take this pump apart anyway to put new seals in it. Really, the only unusual tool you'll need to do this will be a strap wrench. This is a very good, very expensive strap wrench from Napa, but you can find a cheaper plastic strap wrench at Sears, at your local hardware store. They really come in handy for disconnecting these plastic fittings on pools. Take care in how tight you tighten these plastic fittings. They can snap off. I've had them break, and that means you have to do a major plumbing repair to your PVC pipe then. One thing I want to mention to you is these holes on my pump base where the pump bolts to the base, they were stripped out. But if you'll use part of a wire tie, part of an insulated wire, part of a string trimmer string, you can insert that in the hole and then your screw, and that will work just fine. I have used that trick so many times, even in block walls with lag screws, is to use a part of an insulated wire, a strip of solder, plastic, anything to partially fill that hole will work. I bought this little seal kit from Amazon. It isn't Hayward, and Hayward makes some really good stuff, but very expensive. But that pump seal kit worked out just fine. I made some T-handles for these cover retaining bolts because the plastic knobs broke off. I welded a little short section of 1/4-inch bar stock to it and made T-handles. Works just fine. Remove the skimmer basket and take a small cup and get all the water out of the pump that you can. Then by hand, or using a strap wrench, remove your connectors to the pump. Now here is a diagram showing how the pump goes together, but if you'll follow the reverse procedure of what I'm doing here, you shouldn't have any problem. Here I have the pump housing with the motor removed. Now I coat all bolts with Rust-Oleum primer to keep them from rusting. These are not stainless steel, these pump retainer bolts. Once the pump is out of the housing, the first thing you need to remove is the pump impeller. On the back of the motor there is a flat on the shaft where you can hold it with a wrench as seen here. Then you can unscrew that pump impeller on the front by turning it as you're facing it, counterclockwise. As you would loosen any common bolt, it is not left-hand threads. To the left is what they call a diffuser, and it has a gasket on it, and the right part is a seal plate that retains the seal, the main shaft seal. And here is the back side that faces the pump of both parts. You can see by looking at the back side of this seal plate where there's traces of leakage, water leakage down that plate to the bottom. Calcium deposits. My original Hayward pump impeller, the part that moves the water, is shown here on the right. You can no longer buy that part. You have to buy the new and improved version on the left, which comes with a whole new pump housing and is more than $100. I bought just the impeller for that later model pump and had a machinist trim down the exterior diameter of it to match my original pump impeller, and it worked just fine. I'm sure the new and improved version probably pumps better, but mine was pumping just fine as was. So I opted to buy this newer impeller and modify it. And there's a slight difference in the front of these impellers too, but nothing has to be trimmed down. It's just the outside diameter that needs to be trimmed. Now, as a little insurance, I like to use this Permatex Ultra Black gasket making compound. Won't hurt a thing, won't hurt the gaskets, very easy to remove. It's just a little extra insurance. Clean the pump shaft with a Scotch-Brite pad or 400 to 600 wet 3M sandpaper. I have cleaned and sprayed Rust-Oleum on all rusty bolts, including this plastic adapter plate to the pump. You can see that the bottom of this plate has a little drain slot for water to drain out should it leak. I like to use a little Teflon tape going clockwise, as you see here, to make that impeller fit a little tighter on that shaft. This will also help keep the threads from corroding. Now here is the seal kit for this pump. Very, very similar to a GM air conditioning compressor seal, built almost identical. This is a carbon seal that runs against a ceramic face, and of course it has some rubber seals inside the bushings as well. Don't use anything on this seal. Don't use any sealing compound. Don't lubricate it with anything. The water does the lubrication. This is a close-up of the new seal that I put on the diffuser that comes in the kit. This is a ceramic part of the seal installed in the pump housing with the little rubber seal that goes around it. Again, notice that there's a groove at the bottom of this in case of a water leak. The water will drain out. Another view of the pump plate, seal plate with the attaching bolts. You see only 3 here, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is looking at the top of the pump, and you see the groove at the very top of the photo that goes to the bottom for water drainage. And here is the new improved impeller, easily identified by the brass center part, threaded part. Coat the hub of this impeller with silicone grease or a little bit of WD-40 before you slide the seal assembly over it. And then, again, as I say, don't use any lubricant on the seal surface itself. You will need to hold the motor shaft again on the flat with a wrench while you install the new impeller, turning clockwise. Notice the slot on the left for the diffuser that will be going on next. The little fin fits into that slot. After installing the pump impeller diffuser assembly, as shown here, notice the fin of that diffuser fits in a slot on the seal plate. Use your fingers to turn the impeller through the hole in this diffuser plate to make sure that the impeller was properly machined. One word of caution here. There's a capacitor on most of these motors, and a capacitor can hold a charge for a long period of time. Be careful. The capacitor on this motor is to the left and looks like a small D-cell battery. Another thing to be aware of here is this. Some motors can be used for 115 volts and some for 220. This one can be used for both, and there's a switch that you see on the right top, and it's set to 115 because mine is 115. And you can see the correct wiring too here. The neutral wire is at the bottom. The hot wire or line in is the wire in the middle, and of course the ground wire, the bare wire to the green at the top. And here's another view of the repair I made to the cover hold down bolts. The plastic knob had broken away, and I just welded a little piece of 1/4 inch bar stock to make a T-handle. Now to explain to you about what I said earlier about only 3 bolts, I had to use a stud in the hole shown here by the yellow arrow, and the reason that is the threads in this pump housing were stripped out, and I had already gone one oversize with it. So I used a piece of 1/4 inch threaded rod, drilled down into that pump housing and tapped it. Now, if you don't have a set of taps, you won't be able to do that. But you can repair this pump housing. The other 3 bolts have been bored oversized in years past, so I used 3 bolts in that, but like I say, a 1/4 inch stud for the remainder. And this 1/4 inch stud is plenty strong enough to apply the pressure I need to apply. Now, before you can slide this pump into this pump housing, there is a thin, flat gasket that goes around the hole that you see here in the groove where the red arrow is. Be sure and clean that surface real good with nothing that's sharp. Take a piece of plastic, like maybe a plastic knife, and go down in that groove and make sure that the groove is clean for your new O-ring. Now this is where I use some Permatex Ultra Blue or Ultra Black, the silicone gasket making compound. I use that around this O-ring, flat O-ring, as security to make sure that I didn't have any water leaks there. It's easily removable, won't damage your original gasket, and like I say, it's just a little extra insurance since I had some on hand. Some O-rings have a round body and some have a flat body. In this case, it's called a flat-bodied O-ring. So here's the pump completely back together. Works fine, no leaks at all. I do have a minor leak on my filter assembly, which I'll address later when I don't have any pressure or any filter agent in it, when I change filter agents, or I may just wait till the end of the season to fix that little minor leak. Shown here are my 2 pumps, a 3/4 horse on the left and a 1/2 horse on the right. And I keep a spare pump, as I said previously, so that if one fails, and maybe it fails on the weekend and I can't get any parts, I don't have to worry because I have a spare and no algae will grow. I can change that in 15 minutes. Now here is the only leak I have left, a very minor drip at the bottom of this elbow on the left. I'll fix that probably at the end of the season. Maybe some Teflon tape or some Teflon sealer will take care of that. The last seal you will have in this seal kit will be the seal that goes around the cover. Be sure that the cover and the groove for the seal in the pump housing is completely clean. You can lubricate that with a little petroleum jelly or some WD-40. Now, from experience, I'll give you a little word of caution here. When you install your new gasket and put your cover back on, be sure and tighten those 2 screws down evenly, a little bit at a time. I put my foot on top of that plate and apply pressure as I tighten the 2 knobs that hold the cover down evenly. These covers break easily, be careful. With that pump running, it's normal to see some bubbles through the clear cover, But if you have a lot of bubbles, it may be that the seal isn't sealing or you have some air leaks elsewhere. I don't think any system is completely airtight, so don't worry about just a few bubbles. Now, in a video I posted not long ago about repairing pool coping, I now moved on to painting that coping, and I used, I believe they call it Zissinger Bullseye Primer, one coat of that on the repairs I made on my pool coping. Then I used 2 coats of latex paint. I also used a little automotive primer over the Bondo here in the corner where the coping was cracked, if you've seen my previous video. Here I've used automotive spot putty to cover pinholes over the gray primer that is over the Bondo. Then this will be wet sanded and ready for the Bullseye Primer and then the latex paint. The worst places in this coping that were cracking and coming apart was in this corner. Here are the coping clips that cover the joints in the pool sidewall panels. They will be glued down with silicone caulk or DAP latex caulk. Once my coping is all painted and the clips installed, the final thing to do is to go around the edge of the coping and seal the crack between the concrete and the coping. This is a 10-year-old strip of pure GE silicone clear caulk. Trust me, this is the only silicone caulk made that will last just about forever. It's expensive. I bought some yesterday. It's $7 a tube, tax and all. But it's well worth it because another brand by a famous box store, not only did it turn yellow, but it came loose. So put your money in this GE 100% pure silicone caulk. You won't be disappointed. Now, some of my gaps around the pool coping were fairly large, and in order to save money and not spend a lot on this silicone caulk, I used a cheap clothesline that I bought at Walmart. White clothesline. It was only like $1.50 for, I don't know, 50 feet or so. But I used that, and I used a small electrical wire, insulated electrical wire, to fill gaps. You can use anything to fill that gap. Then, so it would show up the right color, I covered that filler material with DAP gray caulk, which is a lot cheaper, just the cheap gray caulk. It has some silicone in it too, and it will adhere to this 100% pure silicone caulk. And then finally, over that cheaper caulk, I used the pure 100% silicone. Take care in using this silicone caulk and lay down a bead that you won't have to tamper with. I wouldn't advise taking your finger and trying to smear this around. Just be really careful in your last application. This stuff will last for a long time. You won't have to worry about it. It can even withstand pressure washing. And finally, some tricks I've learned through the years. I have the DE filter that uses the powder agent, and I found a way to change this that is a whole lot less messy. What I do is take 4 or 5 buckets, one lined with a trash bag, and I empty my filter agent into these 5-gallon pails, and I let it settle till it's water on top. And then when it's water on top, I drain that water back into the pool, pour that back into the pool so you won't waste your chemicals and water. Once you have condensed it down, you can pour all that residue into your pail that has the plastic liner. That's the easiest way to do it from my years of experience. I use this large 25-gallon plastic pail to store my DE powder in, and I have the little Hayward scoop, measuring scoop, to make sure I use the proper amount. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's helped you. I have well over 100 videos on YouTube now. A lot are do-it-yourself videos, but a lot are history videos too that I've done here in Lenoir, North Carolina, to try to save our local history. Thanks for watching.